Welcome to the latest instalment in our series following the restoration of our 1924 Fowler Sugar Plantation Loco, Tully Sugar Mill's No.5. This is an interesting find. Martin put us onto it. It was on eBay and it's a modern reproduction of the 1926 Fowler sales brochure. And there's our loco. This is actually 16339, one of the 5 sisters that were built for Tully Sugar Mill. Ours being No.5, this was Tully No.2. You can see here the steam brake cylinder, which is the part we're next about to remove from the frames. Slightly tricky to hold the spanner at my fingertips while I'm filming there, so apologies for the clumsiness. Dave's undoing the bolts. The cylinder itself came off really easily, actually. And the piston inside, as you'll catch a glimpse of next, was in really good condition. The piston rings were on it, were great. It slid out after a little bit of WD-40. The bolt, however, as you can see here holding the crank, was a different story. We tried everything. In the end, we had to burn off the head, and even then, trying to hit it out through was hard work. Some bolts during the restoration have been dead straightforward. They've just come loose. Others, like this one, took a little more effort. The lever there operates through the brake shaft, transferring the force through the cranks there and up through the brake linkage from the steam brake up the top there. This shaft, actually, the cranks and the pins, as you can see here, were incredibly easy to get out. They were one of the easiest things and surprised us that they just completely were free, even though that part's actually underneath the ash pan of the loco, so we expected it to be an area that would accumulate rust and water and moisture and ash and so on, but no, it was dead easy. The ends of the shaft, the cranks, were a different story, as you'll see in a moment. These cranks have been the hardest thing to take off the engine yet. They were absolutely stuck onto the shaft, and the keys that you can see sticking out there were absolutely stuck into the keyways as well. So heating it up here with the big burner, getting it cherry red, and then we managed to get the splitter chisels down the back of the keyway first to nudge it out as far as you can see here, and then ultimately you're just seeing the end of the operation there. It was much harder than that looked. Here you can see we've got various different wedges that we put in behind the still very, very hot crank to try and finally pull it off the shaft. That whole process took about 2 hours. That's condensed here into 20 seconds or so. Hard work that was, and we're not quite finished with it yet. As you can see here on the general arrangement, the ends of the shaft are held with a rectangular casting with a bronze bearing in the middle to rotate the shaft on. Now, removing these, apart from the horn guides, which have their slipper surfaces on them, removing these was the last part necessary before the frames were bare, so that we could send them off the shot blasting process to find out how good the metal is. Again, these were an absolute fight. You'll see the process condensed here into a few seconds, but actually it was a long job trying to get these off. They were really gripped tightly onto the frames, they were gripped tightly onto the shaft, but they came eventually. Once you finally get these off, there's a clearance hole in the frames around the shaft itself that just allows you the wiggle room to push the shaft as far as it'll go one way, drop out one end underneath the frames, and then drop it out down at an angle below the frames to free it completely. Done, finally. We lifted the frames, dropped them onto a couple of short bogies so that they were then mobile enough for us to be able to push them out in a temporary section of track to get them close enough to the back of the lorry for lifting and taking away for shot blasting. As you can see, there's nothing left on the frames at all now. They're just the bare frames, the stretchers and motion brackets and things like that. We've put, as I think you saw in an earlier video, the horn keeps back on at the bottom of the horn guides there, just to give some rigidity to the frames so there's no danger of them flexing or twisting. We also sent away the cylinder castings and the smokebox saddle. Obviously the bores and the valve faces will be protected before shot blasting, but at least after they've been through the shot blasters we'll get some really nice clean material to get started on assessing where we go with those. frames now away, we can start working on the boiler. This is the main steam manifold from inside the smoke box being removed from the front tube plate of the boiler. Obviously the old gaskets are all scrap, and I think if you look down the main steam pipe you can see the light coming in through the dome because the regulator was removed last week. You can see here we're lifting the boiler up off where we had it stored and we're putting it over onto the inspection pit, which is where we have the locomotive frames. While they're away being shot blasted, this gives us a chance to get the boiler over the pit, get right underneath and inside the firebox. If you look at the drawings here, you can see the back head, and then through the section here you can see the shape of the inner firebox, and you can see the tubes, which you now will see Dave working on inside there. He's grinding away here the peened over section, which obviously retains the tubes in the boiler. It's a horrible job. It's an unpleasant environment. It's sparky and dusty and it burns your arms. It's a thoroughly unpleasant thing, but Dave seems to enjoy it. You can see on this side view the little bit of the tube sticking out in the firebox that Dave's grinding away, and at the very front end you can see the wider section where it's specified to be expanded out to grip the front tube plate. That means that we should be able to, once we remove the peened over section in the firebox, we should be able to push them out through the front tube plate. Looking down the tube you can see the sparks that Dave's making. And it seems Dave wasn't alone in there. The noise and the sparks have awoken a couple of little stowaways. We don't know whether they've made it all the way from Kent or Queensland, but either way we're glad they survived. Cool. Moving on to the smoke box next. Here we're releasing the front cast ring from the remnants of the old smoke box. So again, some bolts and nuts came out dead easy, some fought us all the way. We also had to burn away the actual threaded lugs. One was missing, 3 of them were absolutely rusted beyond any sensible repair. This one that actually you can see is burning through now is the best condition one, but again the pin was rusted through, so either way they had to come out. We've been making new pins and new lugs, and they're quite a straightforward, simple part anyway. The idea here was to lift it just on the crane so that effectively we were putting a little bit of tension in the bolts and then knock the bolts and the smoke box down out. It didn't work as easily as that, so we had to put the splitters in as well. But ultimately, again, after a little bit of a fight, we managed to get the splitters in and pull the top ring off and lift it clear. Moving on to the wheel sets next. This is removing the pony truck A-frame from the pony truck casting. The casting itself is fractured and damaged in a number of places, and we have a game plan for that, but we're probably going to cover it in a future video. Cleaning off all the grime and years of oil that's built up on the driving wheels allows us to see the actual bare metal, and then we can start taking some accurate measurements of what we've actually got. There are various things we need to change here. The back-to-backs on our wheel sets is 21 and 7/8, which is right at the top end of 2-foot gauge measurements, which is what this loco is. We also want to run it on 1-foot 11.5-inch gauge railways like the Festiniog Railway in the Welsh Highlands, so we need to make a compromise of our back-to-back somehow so that it's versatile and will be usable on both those gauges. The bearing surfaces here, you can see Ian cleaning them all up, getting down to a situation where we can take accurate measurements. Again, when we find out what we've actually got, we'll decide whether we reuse these axles or whether they're too badly pitted to be able to do so. We're slightly concerned as well that the axles are slightly oddly worn. They're fatter at one end than they are at the other, which hopefully is a sign that the axle boxes are just poorly fitted, but it could potentially be a sign that we've got a slightly twisted frame. So we'll take some measurements there and let you know what we find. Thanks again for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. There'll be another instalment along soon.